So this next step in the whole story about David is crazy. Saul did not just die. Somebody lied to David about how Saul died just so they could get close to David. And what he does next teaches us everything about elevation, discernment, and God's timing. So we're going to pick the story up. Saul has died, but the way it happens and the way people respond to it, it just shows us a lot about leadership, jealousy, lies, and how God elevates you even when people try to block you. And so I'm going to pick up in 1 Samuel 31, verses 4 through 5. And so I'm going to go ahead and read. So I'm on my phone. This is where I was reading it at earlier. And I'm just going to pick it up right there. But let me set up the story. So when we last left, David refused to kill Saul as usual. Saul was still after David, still trying to kill him, still, bent on taking him out. And David was still holding true to, I will not harm or hurt or kill or retaliate against God's anointing, right? And so this just continues. It's a lot of fighting, it's a lot of war. But I'm going to pick up at the death of Saul, and that's in 1 Samuel chapter 31. And I'm going to skip down to verse 4, and I'm in the New Living Translation. So Saul groaned to his armor bearer, take your sword and kill me before these pagan Philistines come to run me through and taunt and torture me. But his armor bearer was afraid and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When his armor bearer realized that Saul was dead, he fell on his own sword and died beside the king. Saul, his three sons, his armor bearer, and his troops all died together that same day. Y'all, like, oh no. And so I'm going to skip on over. But first, here's what we need to talk about. Saul was wounded in a battle that he was fighting with the Philistines. He begged his armor bearer to kill him because he didn't want to be tortured and humiliated by the Philistines. Because, of course, that's what would have happened had they caught him. The armor bearer was like, no, out of loyalty, out of fear, just out of reverence for the king, the armor bearer refused to kill Saul himself. And so Saul committed suicide, y'all. He took his own life because he was already wounded, but he didn't want to be captured in war. And the armor bearer followed him in that death and took his own life as well. So it was a lot of gruesomeness, y'all. It was suicide. It was, I'm dead, you dead. It was a lot, right? Um, so some leaders fall because they stop listening, learning, and leaning on God. And so King Saul's story was one of those. He was originally chosen because the children of Israel wanted a king. And so God gave them one. I'm gonna have to sip this water. And so, excuse me, when I can't be out here dry throated, but jealousy took root in King Saul towards David, and it destroyed Saul. Like, it took him over. And sometimes a season ends abruptly because God is transitioning leadership. Now, that is key. Sometimes leaders will be up in a position and quickly taken down, and God is transitioning. And so just remember that, right? Just know seasons end. Just know if someone is in leadership and they are crooked, they are evil, or they were appointed by God but stopped obeying, they can be snapped away just like that. Their season can be up, right? And so now I'm going to go ahead and skip to 2 Samuel. And I'm going to go to chapter 1 where this is where somebody lied about killing King Saul, and they lied to David, right? And so I'm going to pick up right here where the conversation starts. Where have you come from? David asked. He was asking someone who just, ran up on him. This was after Saul had died. I escaped from the Israelite camp, the man replied. What happened? David demanded. Tell me how the battle went. The man replied, our entire army fled from the battle. Many of the men are dead, and Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead. How do you know Saul and Jonathan are dead? David demanded of the young man. The man answered, I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning on his spear with the enemy chariots closing in on him. When he turned and saw me, he cried out for me to come to him. How can I help? I asked. He responded, Who are you? I am an Amalekite, I told him. Then he begged me, Come over here and put me out of my misery, for I am in terrible pain and want to die. So I killed him, the Amalekite told David, for I knew he couldn't live. Then I took his crown and his armband, and I have brought them here to you, my lord. David and his men tore their clothes in sorrow when they heard the news. They mourned and wept and fasted all day for Saul and his son Jonathan and for the Lord's army and the nation of Israel because they had died by the sword that day. Then David said to the young man who had brought the news, Where are you from? And he replied, I'm a foreigner, an Amalekite who lives in your land. Why are you not afraid to kill the Lord's anointed one? David asked. Then David said to one of his men, Kill him. So the man thrust his sword into the Amalekite and killed him. You have condemned yourself, David said, for you yourself confessed that you killed the Lord's anointed one. Now, when I first read that, I was like, okay, that's messed up. I ain't kill him. Then I thought about it. Why did the Amalekite dude lie? What made you, why couldn't you just say what really happened? Which is, he asked his armor bearer to kill him. The armor bearer refused. So then he, killed himself. Like, why would you, knowing that David was refusing to kill Saul, why would you take joy in saying, oh yeah, I killed him? Like, okay, so you lied and now you out of there. Also, why were you still around? Once you delivered the news, see me, baby, I would have delivered that news in dip. Ain't no way I would have stayed. Anyway, listen, while David is mourning and still honoring Saul, he was still in that mindset that this was God's chosen and this was God's king. When the Amalekite dude showed up trying to claim he killed Saul, he was trying to gain favor or some kind of reward. And he lied. He straight lied, thinking David would celebrate Saul's death because he was a foreigner. And so maybe he wasn't keeping up with the story. Like, because the whole time Saul been trying to kill David, David could have been killed Saul, okay? But he didn't. Anyway, he brings the crown and the armband to David, right? He presented it to David. Like, so it's kind of sucking up, really. And this is a whole different video. Like, okay, why you shouldn't try to suck up, okay? David sees through the deception and has him executed for claiming to kill God's anointed. The whole time it backfired. You didn't set up in this thing and lied. Anyway, listen. From that, once I realized that the Amalekite guy, he lied, I realized, hey, not everybody who shows up with good news is aligned with God, nor do they always have your best interest at heart. Now, this is a very harsh story, in my opinion, because he delivered the news and he died. But looking past that, think about it. Just because someone brings you news does not mean that it's aligned with what you need to hear. Some people will lie thinking it gets them access, right? Some people are deceptive like that. They just trying to get in good, and that's also not acceptable. David teaches discernment. He doesn't reward messy behavior and lies. And so when the Amalekite claimed to have killed King Saul, David was like, okay, let me mourn. And I guess David thought about it and was like, okay, why did you take joy in telling me that though? Right? You seem real gleeful. Okay. Elevation attracts opportunists, and you don't have to let them all into your inner circle, and you don't have to trust them. That's what I took from that lesson. When I read it, I started thinking, like, okay, so this was an opportunist. He just wanted to be seen. Um, it's a lot with that, right? And so after this, a whole battle starts ensuing. You guys, it doesn't just pick up with David going straight to the throne room and straight to the crown. And no, God told him he was king. And then David's army and Saul's army starts to fight. It was a civil war, right? And this delayed David's full kingship. So after Saul died, after Amalekite guy lied, after David killed that guy for saying he killed Saul, he was back at war. So like this went on for a while. Listen, it was a delay, y'all. How many times can you say you've seen this where you knew you were supposed to be somewhere, you had clarity on it, but it got delayed, right? Whew, just because God promised elevation doesn't mean it's instant. And that I had to sit with for a while because in my mind, I was thinking, well, okay, Saul is out the way. David is on his way to the throne, claim that throne. Game of Thrones. Okay, y'all know I watched Game of Thrones back in the day, baby. I loved Game of Thrones. Anyway, this was a Game of Thrones, though. This was the original Game of Thrones right here because King Saul was the first king that was over Israel. And then now you got David coming for that throne. Listen, it got messy, it got warlike, it got crazy. But anyway, like I said, just because God promised elevation doesn't mean it's instant. Y'all got to remember that. People will fight your promotion, but you don't have to fight back. Now, back to my own personal growth. Ooh, you don't have to fight back. Baby, the way I probably would have been fighting back. And so this is how I know that I have some growth. I have some work to do because every time I read this story, I'm like, man, so David, you just gonna let Saul push you around? You running it deep into the woods, honey. Anyway, listen, you don't have to fight back. How many I got out there are y'all fighters out here? How many of y'all are saying, yes, I will fight back, just like I'm saying? How many of y'all also are in timeout a lot because you need to put down your sword, you need to put down your fight, you need to put down your hands and your fists, okay? Listen, I'm right there with you. I am growing, but we are getting there. Stay aligned, stay honorable, and stay obedient. Listen, David's elevation has been slow. He went from the shepherd who the family rejected to soothing King Saul with music to running from King Saul because King Saul tried to kill him all the time to being camped out all the time uncomfortable in the woods, going deeper into the woods in caves. Why you camped out with 600 folks? That's a lot of people, honey. Oh, I would have wanted space, time to myself. I'm like, oh, I need a corner in the cave to get away from people. Like, what is this? Okay. God said I was king. What is going on? Mm-mm. It was not quick. What God has for you does not require scheming. Now, how many of us have gotten in trouble because we know we heard God tell us something, we're supposed to be somewhere, something is ours, and it's not happening quick enough. So we start like, you know what, I'm gonna speed it along. You know what, I'm gonna help it along, or I'm gonna do this. I know it's mine, but I'm gonna do this. I've done that. I've done that. Listen. What God has for you does not require scheming. I want you to drop it in the chat. Have you ever tried to rush God's timing and what he told you was for you? Have you tried to rush God? Got to take a sip of this water because their throat is throating. Anyway, listen. I'm going to share one of my personal stories. Now, I've told you all a few times about how in undergrad I did not finish at the appointed set time that I was supposed to finish. You go in, you have these classes, blah, 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 blah. Listen, somebody blocked me. It was personal. They just had the power to block me, so they did, right? And I was delayed. When I was delayed, when I tell you, I got looked down on. It was, oh, you didn't finish. Oh, when you gonna finally finish? Oh, I thought you was so smart. What about school? When I tell you this was one of the lowest point, and that was from family. This was one of the lowest points in my life, not finishing. Friends, family, and sometimes people don't even have to speak it over you, but you could feel the judgment and you could feel that you've been being talked about. That's how it was with me when I did not finish undergrad at the time that I thought I would. And so what that did was somebody didn't like me, so they made sure that I had to be pushed back. That was a whole different story, found out that out later, but. And so while I was waiting, I ended up just getting a job back home, working full time. And it was a crazy time for me. And honestly, what ended it was one of my mentors asking me when was I going to finally go and finish undergrad. I guess she watched me for about a year, and I didn't look like I was getting back on track. I looked like I was settling right on into life and just working because that's what I was doing, right? Because you want money, you want to pay your bills, you want to make it. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's nothing wrong with just working. And so that's what I was doing. But my mentor was like, but you're supposed to be finishing school. When are you going to? So I looked at her and said, when are you gonna pay for it? Why you all in my business? And she looked at me and said, go down there and call me from the registrar's office and I pay your tuition over the phone. And I was like, yes, ma'am. That was it. It shut my mouth. Cause what? What am I gonna say to that? And so y'all, I was working full time and I was thinking in my head when I went down there, I could take the class at a local school and just transfer the credit back. Nope. Because I had failed this class, I had to take it there. What that looked like for my life was working a regular 9 to 5, but 3 days a week, having to get in my car, drive 90 minutes to the college, sit through a class, drive back. I had to do this 3 times a week for the full semester, right? And I went ahead and took another class just so I could be part time. Y'all, it was crazy. It was wild. It was hard to do. It was my life. I was not quickly getting to the finish line, y'all. It was a delay, but hey, I kept going. I wasn't angry. I just tried to, look forward. But look, just because, just because you're in delay doesn't mean you're not still on track, right? And in the end, I finished school. And so I ended up the next semester just letting my job go back full time and finished. I was like 23, 24, like moved back into the dorm, felt so out of place. Did it anyway, right? So that I could finish, get, full time. And I finished. But even when I got to the finish line, then the week of graduation, got a call from the office, the registrar's office. Oh, you owe a balance. I'm like, I don't owe a balance, right? Because I had full tuition. Like I qualified. They were like, nope, you owe 1,200, and if you don't pay it by this Friday, you can't walk. So I had to scramble to come up with that. It was a whole long story. It was a fight. It was a battle. It was your girl about to give up. Okay. But I didn't. And I just leaned on God and I kept pushing forward, right? And I ended up graduating. And so just because someone had decided for whatever reason that they threw a little salt in there, made it a little harder for me, it didn't keep me from finishing, right? Listen, if you're in transition, you need to know this. When God is shifting your life, confusion around you, confusion going on, right? It doesn't mean that there's confusion within you. Your purpose is still aligned. I'm going to say it again. When you're in transition, just know God is shifting your life. Confusion may be all around you, but that does not mean confusion is inside of you or within you. And that's where I was, right? Hey, it was stuff going on. I was back and forth. I was commuting. I was quitting a job. But it still was aligned with what I was supposed to be doing, which is for that season finishing, right? King Saul's season came to an end and David's season started, right? No lie, no jealousy, no delay changed God's timing for King David's life, right? Listen, if you're in a transition, you need to make sure you hold steady and stay aligned with God, right? Because what's yours is already yours. You just have to keep your eye on the prize. And so I want to ask you a few journaling questions as always. What are you learning about leadership from this story series about David, right? What are you learning about leadership from David's story? Another question, and this one is personal. Has someone ever tried to block or delay something that God promised you? Has someone ever tried to block or delay something that God has promised you, right? Which part of this story speaks to where you are right now? Are you in the shepherd's field, still waiting to be discovered? Have you been discovered, but still back and forth between the field and serving? Are you full time in the place of service, but not yet quite fully in the place that you know is yours? What part of this speaks to you? Listen, I want you to know transition happens. And if you are navigating some transition right now, check out my journal, my Rise, Thrive, and Flourish journal. It is a good companion to have on this journey. I'm going to link it. It's also, in my link tree in my bio. And ladies, take my free confidence quiz. It shows you right where your confidence is and how you can thrive in this season. And so I'm going to drop all of my questions in the description. And I really enjoyed going over this next part of David's journey with you. And so when we come back next time, we'll be talking about David, getting on that throne. And now he's king. We will see you in the next video.